Hello and welcome to another Broken Binding interview. My guest this afternoon is Luke Arnold. He's the author of The Last Mile in Sunder City, the first book in the Fetch Phillips Archives. This is the Broken Binding Special Edition. There you go. Luke's got his with the fantastic sprayed edges. It's available on the website now. Don't forget, look at lovely. I love this. I love the kind of the door effect and his front office of his PI, have his name on the door, stenciled. Love it, love it. So check this out. It's on the website now. There are copies still available. But here we're going to talk to Luke about the writing of the series and all the rest of it. You probably know him from most recently Scrublands, but of course, people know you from Nautilus and Black Sails and Last King of the Cross and all that sort of stuff. So thanks for spending some time with us and talking about writing and stuff. Just kicking off, I know that when, as an actor, you're obviously working with a director and all the other cast and that kind of stuff, and you're within like a system. Was it quite freeing to suddenly be like, as an author, right, I'm the showrunner. I get to do this. I get to do that. I know some directors are a bit more accepting if you want to tweak the dialogue and stuff, but suddenly you get to do all of it. So is that quite freeing?
It was and still is. So yeah, so thank you for having me. I love everything that Broken Binding does and so stoked with this copy of The Last Mile. And yeah, very much. When it first, look, I think I'd always wanted to be a writer. I think I wanted to be a writer before an actor, which probably meant that I was either a very, helpfully contributing actor or a frustratingly intrusive actor, depending on what kind of director or, writer you were over the years.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take that into consideration. Yes, but I think... And that said, I do think I understood the job fairly early, which is, and I've kind of always rocked up to most acting jobs. So you come in, and sometimes I might overstep the mark a little bit early on, and it gives you a sense of how interested they are in that kind of collaboration. I don't think I'm ever trying to do anyone else's job. I think it's that thing where if you're an actor, you've probably looked, anyone else, whether they're the writer, the director, they're looking at the overall thing. And there are things that you're doing with your character that, you are looking at your character closer than anyone else, which means you might have certain insights. I think the trepidation you get with some directors, rightfully so, is that when an actor comes up to them with ideas, unfortunately, often it's an actor who's going like, I just thought it'd be great if I had a scene where I'm just like looking in a mirror and, and like, like something that's really about them and their career, and just like this moment that they want. Where I think, because I've always been a writer, I like to think that most of the times I try and, put my creativity, into the project, that it is for the good of the project, not for the good of me. Yeah. But really you are, the tough thing about being an actor is you've got sometimes more pressure on you than anyone. We got more eyes on you, both when you're working and afterwards. And you often know the least out of anyone. Everyone else has had so many meetings. They've thought about every like, where are we gonna shoot this? It could be this location, that location. They've probably done a lot of amendments before the scripts that the actors see. So you just have to trust that, like, if you're on something, you hope you're on something good with people who care, and that you just have to get out there, kind of just like play the fool and hope that you'll get some guidance if you're doing something wrong. And you do it to the best of your ability, knowing that you probably will. You don't have the full picture always. You do your thing. You might get some direction, but you're trying to do your job without it, and you go forward. So yes, it's a great job as an actor. It's kind of great to come in last minute, not knowing everything, not having the responsibility on your shoulders, getting to just come in, do your thing. All right, have some lunch and on your way. But then at the end of an acting job, I am always craving to, that creative well. If I haven't been able to kind of use that energy in an acting job, some roles require it, some don't, then I often end a job with all that bubbling up. And so, that writing these books, really, I think it did happen. I went through a bunch of years when, I wanted my acting career to take off. So I'd start writing something, but then the moment there was some guest role on something offered, I'd run away and do that, and the writing would get abandoned. And then I had a great period of time where I did like 2 dream jobs. I got to play a pirate and I got to play Michael Hutchence, or my kind of dream rock star role.
Yeah, yeah.
And so after that, I was like, you know what? I think I could put some time aside and sit down and actually write that book I've been wanting to write for a while. And that's when The Last Smile happened.
Fantastic. I guess, having worked as part of a team on with acting and stuff, suddenly now you're working with an editor and a proofreader. So does that make it easier to take feedback and kind of direction again in some ways from editors and stuff on the work?
Yeah, I actually think it's funny. Writing can be so exposing and vulnerable, but it's also this thing. You get to kind of write it and put it out there, and now it's a thing that you can look at, and it's separate to yourself. So I think, as opposed to when it's your stupid face on screen that everyone's commenting on, like having this wad of pages or words or whatever is kind of, it feels like, oh yeah, it's this thing, and there's a bunch of me in there, and and you get some great beta readers and proofreaders and editors, and all of them contribute to it too, and then you get all these people who come in, and now the imagery of the book becomes so quintessential to what it is. So it is a collaborative effort, and it does, and as well, a book kind of it meets the reader halfway. So everyone's movie of this is different in their own head. So it is this thing that it is nice having something that kind of lives outside of me, and it does mean that, like, I think it probably can be easier to kind of have people talk about it and take notes, because it's there and you can change it and look at it. And acting notes are always kind of tough, because you actually can't, it's why it can be spoofed and parodied so much, is because you actually can't, if you get, and why you see actors saying you hate line readings, because if you just try and like say it the right way and do it the right way, it doesn't actually work. There's some alchemy to acting that you have to capture in a moment, and sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it feels terrible, but it ends up looking fine. Sometimes you think you did the best performance ever, and you look at it, you're like, I don't believe that for a second. So it's so nice to have that, like, with a book, you can sit back and you go like, I'll just rewrite it another 5 times. I'll just look over it again. I'll go for a walk and think about that line. And it's so nice doing that on my own time and terms, not with a whole crew watching, going, all right, are you going to fuck it up again, or are you going to get it right this time? Yeah.
It's like Kubrick used to do like 30, 40 takes, and the actors would just be like, what does he want? I've done this so many ways. What am I doing? And he just keep going. And I'm thinking, God, that must be torturous.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I think it would be torturous. It would also, look, if you've done, a lot of my acting's been for television, where most of the time you die for a second take. So that idea of having that many takes is like, give it to me. Let's go. Let's actually discover stuff, as opposed to like the moment there's not a boom in shot, you move on. So I think that there is something in that mode where, like, with Kubrick and Fincher, where it's just like, no, we're going to do it till you. The idea is, I guess, sometimes you just do it till you stop acting, till you do all those things you're trying to do, all those bits where you're trying to construct the moment and fake it. Just like, hey, let's just keep going till none of that's happening, and you're just here and real and probably bitter and broken and feeling something. Yeah.
What I find interesting with the editing process is sometimes I get comments from my editor, because they're bringing their own perspective. Like you say, everyone who picks up the book and reads it, it's through their own kind of lens. And I've had notes come back from editors about a character and made me think about them differently. Have you ever had the lag on? Oh, I hadn't actually thought about that, the character. And then I had to kind of, if I'm trying to go in a different direction, or I want it a particular way, I kind of angle it more. So I can do that now, whereas before, if it's an acting role, you're like, it's already captured on screen. I can't change that now.
And that's the beauty of that. That's the nice thing about acting, is that you go and you do your day, and then the editing and everything that happens afterwards is someone else's problem. Yeah. Until you end up in the ADR room, like ready to redub it with some dialogue to kind of explain. And so that's the disappointing thing when you get there. But otherwise, it's out of your hands. Where I have had that with, like, I think maybe from the beginning I was surprised maybe how sympathetic Fetch was. So to people, where beta readers and Jenny, my editor, being just more on his side than I maybe expected early on, more forgiving of him, more understanding, where he's a kind of character who, he's weighed down by guilt. He's making terrible mistakes all the time. He's his own worst enemy. He overcorrects. Every time he thinks like, well, I fucked up doing that thing, so I'll go over here, he goes too far, and he gives into his worst impulses, and he's full of insecurities, and in a way, and so I guess it was just interesting, from the beginning, where you I guess it's also that tension that I think sometimes you want. Maybe there's that tension you feel of what readers want him to be, and sometimes you're going like, oh yeah, he's not that yet though, and I think I've been much tougher maybe in like making sure that like he doesn't get any rewards until he really deserves them, and he has a very kind of slow character development, a slow stumbling character development. So I think there's maybe sometimes where maybe some people go like, no, he's our hero, we're following, he should do this. He's like, no, he's not there yet. It's nice you like him, it's great you have faith in him, but he's still got a few more stumbles before he'll get to maybe the that level of kind of competency, and maybe that point where maybe I feel he deserves to be closer to that hero status than maybe other people early on are going like, nah, let's see him rise to the top.
He's got to earn a bit more first before to get to that place.
Absolutely.
So the interesting thing about your books is it's a blending of different genres. It's the kind of noir, crime, hardboiled detective, and the fantasy elements. I mean, do you read a lot of crime, or do you watch a lot of crime? Because I tend to watch more than read, oddly, when I've written stuff.
I look, it's a bit of everything, really. So I think early on, I've kind of said this a few times. So my dad was really into the Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe detective stories early on, and then through that as well was a lover of like film noir, those old bogey films. So I like here there used to always be like some black and white movie on one of the on the ABC here on a Friday or Saturday night. So often we'd either watch it or VCR that. And then we'd watch that. And so I got exposed, like quite young to, the Maltese Falcon and, and a lot of those great classic, the Maltese Falcon and then the Big Sleep, which I absolutely loved. And then started reading all the kind of Marlowe books from that. And so, and then around that same time, then you're noticing that those books have kind of become this pastiche, this reference in so like every cartoon has a kind of hard-boiled detective knockoff, and then video games too. I mean, the closest thing really to this, and it's a kind of would be Discworld Noir, which was a game on the PlayStation and a PC that was set in the Discworld world, but it was and a kind of a direct rip of Raymond Chandler's mysteries. So there were kind of very clear analogies to all those moments, lots of stolen lines. Most of the chapters were kind of names from Chandler books. So I think from a very early age, understood like, oh, here's the real stories of the time. Here's the kind of pop culture references that have existed in the, what was 50 years, however many years since, like, we got like 70, 80 years, and it's just been in the zeitgeist now. I guess probably then at school, my first short stories and stuff would have all been playing in that world, and I think early on it would have all been very, doing that same thing, having fun with the kind of the wallpaper of that stuff, like a bit in the parody, a bit in the using some of the tropes. And then I think what happened is I still for years, I love going back to Chandler and love going back and reading some of that stuff, but I probably outgrew it in some ways, or at least outgrew the parody. Like I think I stopped having fun with the things with the just noir flavoring. And that's probably where I realized maybe in me, a thing I remembered about that time as well is why I was probably drawn to those characters, like the hardboiled detective, this kind of jaded character who doesn't give a fuck what anyone thinks, is so kind of, it's really appetizing to probably an insecure teenager who cares what everyone thinks. and so there was something almost, aspirational in that kind of character. And then of course you grow up and you actually start thinking about who you are in the world, and you probably do, you deal with all the whatever mental issues we all deal with, and you go through all your own, you start, then you're like, oh, I can drink now, and I can be drunk or hungover, and I can make mistakes and feel guilty about it. And you can start to live the things that, as a kid were just in these books, and start to go like, oh, but, these things, certain things that you might do and ways of being that might make you kind of antisocial and jaded and not care what people think and not be a part of the community are not aspirational. They actually kind of make you a shitty person. And I think at that moment where I started then thinking back on my kind of relationship to those noir heroes, that's what clicked for me with, I think, Fetch, and going like, oh, cool. This is not a like, he's not the kind of hero that I want the reader to be going like, oh, like, yeah, he's so cool and jaded. It's like, no, this is a little boy who had an idea of being a man and masculinity that he's tried to fit into, and it has cut him off from the magic of the world and of himself and the things that seemed incredible and beautiful when he was a kid. And so, yeah, that was kind of the beginnings of understanding what I wanted to explore in this series, and why then fantasy and noir felt like a really good match to kind of bring that together.
Yeah, I think you're right. We kind of outgrow some of the heroes of the youth, and we see more of the wrinkles in them and more of the issues with them as you get older. Like now I look at characters like Michael Connelly's Bosch, and I watch like Slow Horses, and they're awful characters to a degree, but I admire what they can do more than the individuals, I think, now.
That's it. And you do start connecting with the like, you want them. Yeah, you want them to connect, and you want them to have, you're like, you see what they could do, but you also like, when you watch it, you do. I think we probably more these days, we get a bit more fed up with characters who are their own worst enemy to a degree. When you're like, just talk about this. Deal with your shit, man. Like, you don't need to make
have a conversation.
You don't need to make everyone around you's life harder through your existence. So that's right. So there's still a lot of fun to be had in those characters. And I think the either the stoic or the jaded, the dark hero or anti-hero is still has this kind of appeal, but I do think there are certain elements that we have probably outgrown in our understanding of kind of what we want from, and I think maybe the world's tolerance of men not dealing with their shit is thinning and thinning. Oh yeah, rightfully so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, really, really thinning.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, tell people a bit about Fetch and this series and the sort of the setup for the world, because it's quite unique.
Yeah, so in this world, this land was a magical place full of dragons and wizards and elves, like that we might have, that we have definitely seen before. And here in this world, all that magic is in some way connected to a sacred river beneath the crust of the planet. The humans, the story goes that because they were jealous of all this power, they tried to plug their machinery into it. And when they did, the river froze. So when it crystallized, and when that happened, the dragons fell from the sky. The wizards couldn't do spells. Elves started aging. Every different creature in this world has become a kind of twisted, deformed version of their former selves. And one of the human soldiers responsible for this calamity, known as the Coda, is Fetch Phillips. And so now he works on the streets of Sunder City, trying to do odd jobs for ex-magical creatures to try and in some way mildly make up for what he did and the part he played. And then rumors start coming through about whether or not the magic could come back. So each book is a kind of, somewhat standalone little mystery, exploring one of those threads with an ongoing quest to see whether they can turn back the clock.
So did the situation come first, or did the kind of redemptive character come first when you were developing this series?
Oh, I think a bit of what I was saying before. I think the character was kind of there, that kind of gumshoe in a fantasy world. I probably wrote wrote short stories with a version of Fetch when I was like 17 or something. And that was, and then as well, I probably saw the limits of that and going, well, that's kind of been done before. And then it was kind of in that moment of going like, oh, I guess understanding that little thing of going, oh, sometimes to try and seem like an adult, to seem cool, to seem manly, we can cut ourselves off from certain parts of ourselves. And how hard it is to kind of get that magic back when you feel disconnected from the magic you felt in your youth. And I think that having that thought at some point, it might have even been working on a different project or something, thinking about that experience, that I then went, oh, if I give that back to that character, then you put that in the world as well. Go like, oh yeah, then the actual world doesn't have magic and it's kind of his fault. And then it's, and so it was kind of, it's there's a plenty of themes in there, but I think one of the themes was kind of inspired by that feeling of going like, oh, what if he is just this, kind of, yeah, when he was a young man, he was really trying to work out, what am I supposed to do to be a man? What am I going to do? And what should I do? And then follows the wrong people, ends up in the wrong place, and does something that kind of really shatters the world in a terrifying way.
Yeah, certainly. So when you're acting, sometimes you get a part and it might just say like John Mechanic 34 and that is it. That you've got to like build the whole thing in your own head to inform the character, to inform the performance. But this time with Fetch, you can do the whole thing. So how far back did you go? Did you literally go back to his childhood to be like, oh right, he was this and he had a single mother, or how far would you like develop his character?
Yeah, so I think doing the first draft, there are kind of flashbacks in there that weren't in the initial. I kind of written them, and then I'd left them out of what I submitted to Orbit first of all, and then they were like, and because the original thing I was writing was going to feel much more like a Chandler-esque story. Right. It is just the mystery. It's quite pared back. You almost feel like it couldn't, like it had. Like that it feels kind of close enough to our world that if you're not a big fantasy reader, that you just pick it up and it's a mystery novel that happens to have some of these other characters that are part of it, but I wasn't going to spend too much time in that world. Then I think because it was Orbit who picked up the book, being a sci-fi fantasy publisher, I think then in those edits there was probably a bit of a move to kind of bring that stuff to the fore. So I had already done the work at that point of going like, I had kind of, because it was kind of fairly quintessential to understand for Fetch getting involved in the way he did, to like actually playing a part in how it broke the world. I kind of needed to know how that happened. And that does begin from really him being a kid. And the idea that, he is kind of orphaned young, and then he grows up in a walled off city called Weatherly, which in this world is like, it's a place where a number of generations ago, humans who just couldn't actually deal with being the kind of bottom rung species of this world were like, hey, let's just build a world where there are no magical creatures, where it is us, where we are the top of the food chain. And so Fetch ended up growing up in there, but because he'd had these couple of years outside when he was young, he had a sense of something out there, which means all his time growing up in Weatherly, he never really felt at home there, never felt part of it, had a sense like, I know something else. Now, I think there was a version where that's like way back. There was an earlier iteration where that's where the story began. I think the creation of Weatherly was really there to begin with, to go like, oh, you can begin in a world that there is only humans, that this is what's going on, and then you get outside the walls and find this other stuff. Obviously didn't end up going that direction, but it also served nicely to gave Fetch this time where he kind of spent his whole adolescence in a community and in a whole society where he did not feel at home, where he felt like, and that sense of disconnection, like I come from somewhere else and I know something else, which means I'm not really going to get invested in this world. Yeah. And everyone else is so invested here and I feel a part of it, which would have kept a bit of distance between him and his adopted parents, everyone around him. So he kind of was an outsider from a very young age. So then when he escapes Weatherly and ends up in this kind of magical world, he's in the world he remembers, but he's an outsider yet again. He's still gone, like he's there and he's catching up. He's kind of a child he's kind of an adult child learning how this world actually works at a later age, which leaves him somewhat susceptible to be pulled this way and that, in follow people who maybe if he understood the world a bit better, he might not have.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So having done all this character work, did it make it easier to write additional stories after after first Sunder City. You'd be like, okay, we could explore this aspect in the second book and look at this part of this part, because you've laid the groundwork. You've already done the hard work now.
Yeah, I think definitely in this way where each of them's kind of a little mystery. Like I because there are kind of two parts to it. There's each little mystery of like, can the magic come back? What are we exploring in each book? And an overarching sense of more of Fetch's past coming into the fore. Maybe at some point, there's a plan and it will all somewhat come full circle. But the joy has really been going like, okay, where is Fetch now? Based on what we know about him, where is he now? What is he dealing with? What mystery will be the best challenge for him at this moment? Usually it's like, what's the worst thing that could happen to him right now? What's the worst thing, the temptation you could give him? What's the worst challenge? And then having a mystery that completely explores that moves the overarching, story a little further forward. But yeah, I think once Fetch is like, it is, having, I write some other things and, at the moment going off and doing some other stuff before I come back to Fetch stuff, in a way. But Fetch is like, yeah, the work was done with Fetch fairly early. And from the very beginning, I felt very comfortable in his voice, in his, falling apart, holy shoes. He's very comfortable because I think, there's enough of me in there, but also I think that work done early definitely helped.
Yeah. So I wrote a hard-boiled story as well, and I found that when I started working on it, I'd absorbed some of the rules and the functions and the kind of inbuilt things of the genre. I was thinking, did you just start writing that way as well, or did you have to actually sit down and think, what are the rules? What are the kind of the structure of the genre? Or it's because you've grown up reading it and watching it so long, you're like, oh, it just became more natural when you wrote it?
Yeah, I think I probably think when I started the first one, it so came out in a rush that it was just like, like finished a long running show, had some time, had money in the bank for the first time in my life. And I was like, I could write the book. And I think a lot of it really just came out. And relying a bit on instinct and the stuff I'd read and, just kind of being in the character was probably a bit of that thing too. I always say, I think acting really helps writing, but writing doesn't necessarily help acting in the way where when you're acting, you're creatively kind of on the front foot. You're having thoughts and acting on them, and you're trying to silence your inner critic and just like, throw things out there. And so after doing a lot of acting, sometimes sitting down to write comes really easily. After writing for a while, you get kind of further back in your brain, and you've probably got a good inner critic going because you're kind of editing each sentence as you're writing it, and and going back, and you always, you kind of don't want to rush forward until you're like, is that the right thing? We want that there. Oh no, cool. That feels good. Oh, then we can build on it this way and build on it this way. Actually, I'll go back and change that. And you can't act that way. If your mind's doing that when you're acting, you are ruined.
And watching your eyes working, they're like, what's he doing? What's he thinking?
Yeah, exactly that. Where you're like, whoa, this character's, it's like, oh, we hired you. Like, it's meant to be like charming, confident. You seem riddled with self-doubt. It's like, yeah, I'm just,
I'm looking some shit out. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm trying to edit your dialogue as I'm saying it is what's happening. Yeah. So yeah, it is. So I think the first one really came out in that kind of rush, and in some ways, it's kind of like the all the books afterwards have been planned a lot more, and and it's one of the things that like both good and bad things come from that. I think the beauty of some of this book is that it's so, I don't know, it was kind of, it's very much you're just catching Fetch where he is and dealing with what he's dealing with. And there's something about that kind of, even for me, I don't know I'll ever quite be able to fully recapture some of the elements of Fetch and my writing in that one, just because it did kind of, I just fell into this character's shoes and ran around in the world, and it was really kind of joyful in that way. And then of course, like all of this, you rewrite it a million times and edit it a million times and all that. So but there was a kind of joyous rush out into it there. I think some of the ones afterwards, there's probably certain books like I went back and The Long Goodbye. I would have went back and read The Long Goodbye before Dead Man in a Ditch because there were similar themes there. So with some of them, I've gone back and looked at specific books. And then I think Chinatown was a big part of Whisper in the Wind. the fourth one. So sometimes I'll go back and go like, oh, I actually do. Sometimes you do go like, I do want some of those references a bit more in the front of my mind to play with them and to nod at them and tick those things off a bit. But I think there's enough there dancing around that I don't have to do too much now to start thinking like a hard-boiled detective.
Yeah. That initial idea and the rush of it and getting that first book out, it's hard to replicate it when you've got like an idea that's like itching at the back of your brain. Like, I just need a bit of time and space to get this out, and then I'm all right.
Yeah, and when you to go like, maybe no one will read this. Maybe no, like just
it's for me. It's sometimes.
Yeah, it's such a. It is so amazing. It's a really weird thing to get to a point where you go, you're writing something now, and you're like, oh, I know at least some people will read this. There's a chance that and with the Fetch books going like, oh, this will go out there. People will be able to buy this, and it like when you're writing with that knowledge, it is such a privilege. It's insane, but it's also, but sometimes you do go like, yeah, what to get that first book. And look, I've written another book before that you just kind of finish and throw that one away. But that real rush of like writing something that is kind of just for you and that you have no idea, there's kind of no pressure and no worry because you're like, oh, if it's shit, no one will read it. Fine. So let's just keep writing. Yeah.
It's that thing of once you're in the system and it works, they're like, right now do another one. Now you've got the pressure. Now you've got deadlines.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, I gotta go back and so obviously we said you described you're blending fantasy with this kind of noir aspects and the hard-boiled thing. Did it allow you to play with the archetypes a bit in this world and like twist them like a femme fatale, but you could be like, but in fantasy world, what does that look like? And what could it be different that we haven't seen before?
Yes. Well, the fun thing was that in this world, all the stories take place post-coda, so when the magic is twisted. So for that, I actually decided that it's kind of the reason to have the existing archetypes was for that reason. That we would have got bogged down in exposition if I had to say, well, in the past, there were these magical creatures called gobbledygoos, and they had these powers, and now that the magic's gone, this is how they're affected. So it was using the shorthand of wizards, unicorns, elves, those things, just because then where the fun is going, well, what's happened to them without the magic, if the magic is leased out of their bodies. And so and because it's very fun to think of like, on the simple level, elves who thought they were going to live for thousands of years having mortality thrust upon them is kind of endlessly interesting. It always feels potent. Every elf in the story that comes up, you're like, oh, I can get in touch with whether it's their disbelief, the injustice, their anger, whatever it is, that makes sense. And then, you have fun things like the unicorns in this world who the idea, was that their horns were pure magic. It was like a piece of the river growing out of their forehead. So once that crystallized, that's now eating back into their brain like coral. So unicorns are now these kind of rabid animals that you find out in the wilderness and do not want to encounter. So yeah, I think that's where the most fun was with the archetypes, is going, okay, what is the dark twisted version of each of them if the magical element was either removed or turned dark in some way? And there's a bit of a theme of that in the books as they go on, where because there is a bit of a sense that maybe when a thing like this happens, that there is a sense of acceptance and moving forward might be the best thing. And at least in some of the books, without saying too much, that trying to reclaim the past generally doesn't end too well.
Yeah, sometimes you can't go back.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean there aren't maybe some very fun things in the future, but trying to directly go back seems to be somewhat unwise in this world. Yeah.
Did you ever think about writing this in third person, because it's first person with Fetch? Did you ever start a draft and be like, no, it's not? Because a lot of detective stuff and stuff is first person, because you get their inside their view, their attitude, and I think it's easier to do it first with this kind of a story.
I never considered third. Like I write other stuff in third, and I've, I guess there are things where I've written. It's interesting then writing maybe screenplays and scripts for other things. There's some stuff I've done with Fetch in other mediums that I won't say too much about, but where you get to like it feels very different writing about Fetch rather than writing as Fetch. And definitely in this, I think it only really. The first book in particular, it's having a lot of fun with that noir voice, and I think you can only do it in first person. And I never even considered it the other way. Not for this one. Do
you think you could have written this book like 10, 15 years ago? Or do you think you needed that life experience to be able to look back and be like, I'm not that 22-year-old, I'm not that 16-year-old anymore. I've changed and I've grown a bit and I've evolved.
Yeah, I don't think I would have. I think it would have been different. I think it probably would have been a lighter book, a kind of, I'd probably say my kind of Pratchett inspirations would have been clearer and more unkind. As in like I would have been doing a real poor man's Pratchett earlier, I think, as far as I would have been playing with the world. Probably like having fun with it, but I don't think I would have known what to say about this character and this world at that time. I think that real sense of like, you need to get a little jaded. You'd need to feel distanced from your youth enough, I think, to kind of properly write this kind of character. And I'm sure it'd be, I'm sure it gets better as I get older and would be better again if I hadn't started writing for another 10 years. But I think at that time, why it probably worked well is because Fetch is still, he's not the old jaded, he's not the really old jaded guy. He's actually kind of a young man who has made too many mistakes too early and is shutting himself off to protect himself. And I think that's kind of why it was fun to write somewhat younger as well, because there's still, I'm still in touch with enough. There's still enough young man energy in me, but I've also made enough mistakes and fucked enough things up and have enough to reflect on to give both sides to him.
Yeah, this white my hair isn't from paint. It's, I didn't watch me get too many wet paint walls. Exactly.
Yeah,
it's been a few years, man. It's been a few years.
Exactly. Yeah, I just had to pick like a grey nose hair out before I started this interview. That was it. When you sit here on camera, you're like, "What's that?" It's like, "Oh, great. Yeah, it's coming out my nose."
I'm like, what is that? Grey? Oh, that's coming out. That's coming out. I mean, you talk about obviously dialogue as an actor. It is everything. It's the rhythm and the cadence and. I don't know if you read much comics, but by the very nature, not only is the rhythm, but also it's quite limited space. Like in one speech bubble and one page, you can only have so much kind of so many words. Did that help with the brevity of doing dialogue in the books as well? I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, so I write graphic novels now as well. So got a series called Essentials that the Lab Press, a kind of new cool graphic novel imprint. As the first one's just come out earlier this year. And so doing a lot kind of in that world at the moment. That I do think, like I said, I don't know how many times I would have said the whole book of The Last Mile out loud, before even then doing the audiobook. Like I tested all my, as an actor, that's how I knew if something sounded right. And that's probably something where I generally do, unless you've got, as good as, especially it's kind of everywhere. A lot of TV the scripts don't have a lot of time. So as you don't like those great screenplays you read of generally films, like there's amazing TV screenplays, but often they are, but they're really great dialogue is usually in film because it just takes time, it takes thought, and TV's done on such a it's such a machine. So often there are things that just don't sound right They don't feel right, or they don't sound right in the ear. And so I think as an actor, you do get used to making those slight adjustments. And it can just be swapping words around sometimes, taking one out, making sure like two lines don't rhyme with each other when they're not meant to. That stuff that just often in amendments where they're doing like last minute changes, that stuff gets kind of left in. So you kind of I think you have to be a writer as an actor, especially a TV actor. And so I do think that came from that stuff. That came fairly naturally to me, I think, the dialogue side of things. No, and knowing and that, you don't want, because I'm hearing it as a scene. And if someone's talking too long, it sounds wrong. You're like, well, they'd interject. Something would happen. The rhythm of that and the musicality of that, I think I have a pretty good sense for. And so I think that stuff did probably come easier to me jumping into prose than probably, if it's like, all right, I got to do, pages of, big print to be in a script, but, just pages of exposition or whatever. I probably needed to, that probably took me a bit more thinking over than when it was like, oh, we got a couple of characters in a scene. Let's just back and forth. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you've done the audiobooks as well. So now you get to kind of listen to the whole thing and other people commenting as you're going along on it and things.
Yeah, no, and that, like, the audiobook's really fun. The truth is I can't do all the voices that I hear. So unfortunately, even I have to kind of bring it, sometimes people are like, so that's like exactly how you want to deliver it. It's like, no, it's the best I could do. Like, writer Luke would be like, oh, I'd change a bunch of things. But it's the best that, like, actor Luke could do in a booth with limited time. Yeah. And the accents that I feel confident enough to add as main characters, where there are just some, I kind of end up relying on accents that I've been doing for years and feel comfortable in, even though if in my head I might hear, had different accents and voices. It's just, you can only, I can only convincingly pull off so many, I think.
Yeah, but it becomes a struggle. And you have to have a whole cast of like people in the booths at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Which would be great. That'd be fun to do more of a radio play kind of version of it at some point. Yeah.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. Slightly different topic. I know you've been working on games with your brother. You've been working on a game coming out with Steam. So are you playing much at the moment? Do you have time to play much video games at the moment?
Look, I have time for nothing. But but that said, games are my kind of wind down. And I think so I can kind of excuse it. Yeah, this is the first game I'm making. It's a cool little pixel art action adventure, action arcadey game. It's great, and so I'm doing the art for that, which is amazing. Like, it's just a whole other thing, so relaxing, but the most time consuming thing. I thought novels were time consuming. Doing pixel art animation for a game is the most time consuming thing I've ever done, but somewhat meditative, but it's a lot of work, especially as a whole new skill, because it's kind of somewhere between art and maths, because it's a lot of patterns and stuff. But I probably do, if I have it, like, I really need to read more, but that falls by the wayside, and games still kind of remain. Partly because I've always wanted to make games, so I've always wanted to know what's happening. And games is probably the space right now where things, every week someone does something that hasn't been done before. It does it in a different way. So I'm always tempted to jump in and see what that is. It's funny, recently because I have no time, I was like, well, I'll just play games that are like little rounds.
Yeah.
So, but then you get into things like, like a Vampire Survivors like kind of games, or Merge Maestro little puzzle games. But I feel like that actually fucks my brain up. Like those little twitchy games, it's like the Tetris effect thing. It's just dopamine spikes and little habits. And so I come away not actually I want to play that game, but I kind of haven't learnt much, and it's been kind of single-minded. So I did just start playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.
Right.
So a real slow, RPG. It's great. Lots of story. And I think recently, because I was so busy, if I'd open a game and there was a long cutscene, I'd be like, oh, I don't have time. But I'm kind of now instead like trying to limit my sessions, but actually slowly riding my horse across the countryside, and do a conversation with an innkeeper and go, all right, I'll go to that thing. And it's been really great. I actually find like I'm actually coming away from those sessions really like relaxed. Like it's given me the little reward. I think games for me are still a bit like you've done some work.
Right.
You want to have a little reward that isn't a pint or or going to compromise you. You just want to, then sitting and playing some games for a bit is great. So that's what I've been doing recently. How about you? You much of a gamer?
Yeah, always.
Headset tells me yes.
Sometimes I'll be like, just have a quick blast. I'll be playing like Helldivers 2 and it's like half an hour blowing up aliens. But then it's like I'll be like, I'm really buzzed now and I want to relax. So I'll put like Zelda Breath of the Wild on. I'll just ride my horse around, collect some things, do a bit of cooking, do a little puzzle. And it's just so like, do you want to fight the big boss? No, I just want to ride off here, do a little puzzle, potter around. And then I come away and I feel like I've relaxed now. I'm not just like, what's next? What's next? Next mission, next mission. You're like, no, bring it down a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm the same thing. I've got my one RPG for the moment and I'm limiting myself to that. And I guess the thing is my brother was my main gaming buddy. And now not only is he like he's just had a bubba. And so he's not only busy with that, but then he's the programmer for the game. So really, we can't justify like one of us stopping and playing a game for a bit, but us going like, "Hey, tonight let's just like put hours into a game," which is where we'd have our most gaming time. Is like, well, no, that's just not going to happen. Where, we can't both be putting so much time into away from the project that we really need to get out, which is still a long way away because as always you want to add stuff and change stuff, and even though this is meant to be our first little game that we just get to market, so we've like done our first thing, you fall in love with it and you get ideas and you refine it. We actually did our first like live play test a couple of weeks ago and it went really well, so that both was like inspiring and also like but we should do all these things. So it's fun.
6 months more work on top now.
Exactly.
Cool look at that and but that's a lot of work. Shit.
It's very much of this trying to go like it's just our first game. At least we just want to get the demo out so that you can have that out and people playing it. So that's what we're working on. We're doing what we can to get that out. But a little bit of gaming still in free time because otherwise you do just burn it. You do have to stop. Be very careful about burnout. And I think switching between writing deadlines, acting jobs, and making a game is like there's sometimes you got to just slowly ride your horse around the countryside.
Otherwise, you'll just never off. You're always like, what's next?
Yeah.
So speaking of next, actually, 4 books are now done in the Fetch Phillips Archives. So what's next? Are you planning more books in the series?
Definitely planning more books in the series. At the moment though, there will be some other things. I'm probably my next writing projects. So essentials at the kind of graphic novel world. I've got the first one coming out. There's kind of nothing I can really talk about now, but there's in a bunch of spaces that aren't another Fetch novels quite next. Like I've got the next one outlined and already going. I'm excited to jump into it when I can, but it really is getting the demo of Shoot for the Moon, our game out. Hopefully soon announcing a couple of other things in kind of the comics and other media space, and then still even seeing whether it's another Fetch book next or bite the bullet on actually doing something a little different as the next book, and then letting Fetch sit for a bit without saying too much. There's a little bit of a the what is it? Something kind of shifts in a somewhat significant way at the end of the 4th book. So I feel good leaving Fetch where he is for the moment and coming back to him in a little while.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
A couple of questions just to finish on from the audience. Some people are saying, are you planning any events in your UK or Europe or book events? What's planned?
I'd really love to. The tough thing, and this is where there are some great things that work between being an actor and a writer. Like it's because you get these intense times of acting work, and then there's always times in between. That's when most actors go insane. I get to write a book. And so that's, but acting, you get things booked in either way in advance or last minute. Like it's a thing where you're always auditioning as an actor. And often the thing is like going, hey, you got the job. Great. okay, in 2 days, get on a plane and fly out here and do the thing. and so I always feel really guilty that that booking in for book events, and the same, and the acting is, and trying to, stay alive and make enough money for stuff that booking in too far in advance for book stuff. I know that, but if there's an acting job that could come up, then I'd probably take it. And so I don't want to screw people over. So usually they're kind of these rare moments where I get to book things in. I'd love to do it. And it is the thing that if I book something in, I kind of go, well, that's happening. And I make sure no acting stuff happens at that time. I think at the moment I'm just juggling too many things. So I'll let you know when it's happening. I don't do a lot of social media really, but look on Instagram, follow my Instagram, and I will announce anything I'm doing in person there.
Okay. So the other thing someone said is, what's the first page pajama party? What is probably about this? I posted. I'm like, I don't know. I should ask him if it's rude or not, but I said I'll ask him. Okay.
Yeah. So that's my series on TikTok that I have not done for a while. I think I did one for Whisper in the Wind, but it's probably haven't done anything significant on there for a year or something, but people keep finding it and following it. Like it's doing quite well, but I don't know anything on there. I just read the first page of different books for some reason in my pajamas. That just felt like where I started. It was one of those things where, well, you know what it's like. Promoting books is such an impossible thing. And then Book Talk's a thing. But I really wasn't feeling like I wanted to be on Book Talk, like begging people to buy my book or something. So, but I thought I could read the first page of both my books and friends' books and books I like or books I even don't like. And so that's what I do. So if you're on TikTok, check out Long Luke Arnold, which is me on there. I am going to do more, actually. I think, cool. I think I'm going to line up a bunch tomorrow. It's always a thing when I do an interview or you do something social, all right, I'm in that mode now. Let's do some TikToks, get a bunch done. So yes, I will do a bunch more. I'm sorry for not continuing with that as much as I should, but there will be more soon.
Awesome. Right, well, just to say to everyone, don't forget the links down for the Last Mile in Sunder City special edition from the Broken Binding. The copy's still available at the moment, but obviously they're limited, so get one as soon as possible. Look at
beautiful stuff.
Look at it. Fantastic. And
I do.
Go ahead.
I'm with you too. That door is that's the angel door in this world, which Fetch's office, he had a door that because there were flying creatures, you could enter in through the door, in the outer wall. Of course you can't anymore. So it kind of represents something a little darker. But yeah, I'm absolutely in love with this. So thank you to the Broken Binding for doing this. It's
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Keep an eye on their social media for news about potentially other books in the Fetch Phillips Archives. Who can possibly say special editions? We'll have to wait and see what happens. But thanks for joining us, Luke, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Cheers.
All right. Good night, everyone. Good night.